Welcome to this episode of Collab Lab, Collaborative Professional of Washington's interview series in which we speak with experienced family law attorneys about how they introduce collaborative divorce to prospective clients. Our goal is to learn about the varied approaches that practitioners use to explain the process and highlight the benefits of collaborative practice. These interviews are part of CPW's ongoing efforts to support and strengthen our professional community. Hi, my name is Jessie Deason, and I am a financial neutral out of Everett, Washington. In today's episode, we're speaking with Tara Richardson, a family law attorney out of Seattle, Washington. Thank you, Tara, for joining us and sharing your perspective.
Yep, you are very welcome. Glad
All
to
right.
be here.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and your collaborative practice.
Well, I was collaboratively trained in 2008, and that came after a particularly awful 3-week-long trial where I just finally said litigation is like the worst way to resolve family disputes. So I got collaboratively trained, started taking collaborative cases after that, and then slowly was migrating my practice to have more and more collaborative cases. And then finally, about 5 years ago, really just said, I'm not going to take any more litigation cases, and just really made the affirmative decision that I'm only going to do collaborative work.
How do you respond when someone asks you, what do you do for a living?
I say I'm a divorce attorney because that's what I am. And I know that people are supposed to have a more interesting, it's like the 30-second elevator speech. But I guarantee you that if you say you're a divorce attorney, that is probably one of the best conversation starters just in and of itself.
All right, so we're going to move on to talking about what it looks like when your firm fields an initial prospect. Tell me about some of the nuts and bolts about what it looks like when a prospective client reaches out to your firm.
Yeah. So generally speaking, we usually get intake through emails, and we have a general email through our website, but I would say that most clients are emailing me directly as a direct referral from other professionals like you or former clients or other attorneys.
When a prospective client reaches out, tell me about the workflow after that initial email.
Sure. So obviously, first we need to do a conflicts check to make sure that the other party hasn't been in communication with my law partner, or that I was at a firm prior to the firm I'm with now. There wasn't any sort of work done with other conflicting parties. And then once that conflict check is clear, I have my legal assistant set up an in-depth consultation with the client. We sort of play it by ear as to whether they want to do Zoom. Most potential clients are good with Zoom, but a fair number do want to come in. And so I'd say whichever you want to do. One thing I don't like to do is I don't like to do initial consultations just via phone, because I think it's really important to have that personal interaction, even if it's not in person, at least being able to see who you're talking to.
Is there an initial filter at all between, the setting up of the appointment, even to get to that point? Have they been filtered out besides the conflict piece?
Sometimes, but generally speaking, a lot of times clients, especially when they email me directly, I guess I should say, they'll say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I was referred to you by such and such. Kind of like, here's a high level of what's happening. And so a lot of it is through the initial email. Yeah.
Does the client provide any information ahead of time?
So again, it depends. A lot of them will provide information in that initial email. I mean, I've had like literally paragraphs of what's happening. For example, they had a prenuptial agreement. I've had collaborative cases that for one reason or another, there's actually a petition that's already filed. Sometimes clients will say, I put together a spreadsheet of just our assets and liabilities. Do you want to see it? I'll say, yeah, absolutely. Send it. I'd like to see it. But I don't require there to be any documentation or anything like that.
Okay, great. So the client has arrived to the initial consult. They're on Zoom or in person. Walk me through what that looks like.
Usually what I do when I first start the consultation is I kind of turn it over to them. And I literally just say, okay, tell me what's going on. And some people will launch right into that and they will tell you what is going on. Sometimes there are people like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, okay, like how long you've been married and how, do you have kids? And once you just get those little questions started, people will just start going. So sometimes you have to be like, okay, like let's put this back on the tracks. My consultations are about an hour long in length. And usually for about the first, say, 20 minutes, half an hour, it's really just the client talking about what's going on in their world, what's important to them, how they got to where they are. And then I just sort of say, look, let's just kind of go organically, ask questions. I want the clients to give me their information first without me trying to guide what information I'm looking for.
Okay.
That's kind of one of the fundamental also principles of collaborative as well. It's like asking those open-ended questions, asking those curious questions, rather than looking for a specific answer or looking for information that's going to answer a specific question.
So after the first 20 minutes, they've given you lots of bits. Tell me about
Mm-hmm.
how you start to weave in, you talking about either divorce process options or collaborative divorce.
Yeah. So a lot of times you can see clients sometimes on Zoom, or oftentimes when clients come in, they have their little book and they have questions. So I said, I can see you have some questions. Why don't we start there? What questions do you have for me? And sometimes they're like, if they don't have specific questions, their question is like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? And that's my invitation to give the clients the A to Z of your different processes. Now, obviously, the clients that I'm talking to aren't looking for litigation attorneys, because that's not the clients that I'm getting. And so I tell them, I'm not going to tell you what a hardcore litigation case looks like, because that's not why you're here, clearly. But I say, there's everything from the kitchen table. You guys can sit down and work it out yourselves. Usually that's not really an option because there's complex issues, but you can. And then moving through there being a mediation process where they meet with a mediator and have attorneys on the side, and I talk about how that looks. And then I talk about the full collaborative case and what that looks like, and just sort of give them the different options. And then also say you can also do kind of a cooperative case. Now, again, that's very dependent on the attorney that your spouse works with, because I jokingly say, to some attorneys, being cooperative just means I'm going to be slightly less of a jerk than I normally am, and that's not a cooperative case. That's a litigation case. But if it truly is a cooperative case, and to be perfectly honest, is a very small group of attorneys and professionals that I'll work with, because then I know it is truly a cooperative case and not just like I'm going to be less of a jerk case. And I just give them all of that information, and so they can start thinking about what might be the best process for them, what process they may have already talked about with their spouse that fits into that continuum. Or if they were thinking like they might go one way, they're like, oh, I didn't know about this other option. Maybe this is something we want to explore.
So walk me through with some details about what it looks like to tell a prospective client about collaborative divorce. Give me the spiel.
Yeah. So what I talk about with collaborative, I say that you and your spouse are both represented by collaboratively trained attorneys, and we put together an interdisciplinary team of professionals to help support you in making decisions that work for you guys and your family, work for each other, rather than trying to cram your needs into like this sort of preordained sort of litigation box. And so I talk about the role of the financial neutral, the role of the divorce coach, and give them the high level of how a collaborative case flows through to the end.
Will you share some of those details here?
Sure. So I talk about how, in the first meeting, it's an administrative meeting where we're forming the collaborative team. Then we move on to an information gathering stage where they're working more with a financial neutral. And if they have children, they're working with a parenting coach to work on a parenting plan. They're working with the financial neutral who's gathering financial information. Then we have our next meeting where we review the financial report. Then we move on to scenario buildings and hopefully reaching an agreement. So, usually I say that's kind of working on a timeline of, say, 4 to 6 meetings, usually, again, depending on the issues, probably more towards the 6th end of things. And then in the background, they're working with a parenting coach to work on parenting. And that's really kind of a separate, not completely siloed, but it's not something that the attorneys are going to be involved in predominantly.
What do you say when you have someone who doesn't want to hire a coach?
Well, kind of depends, because obviously this is their process. And I know this is a big conversation within the collaborative community, is to coach or not to coach. I feel that a coach is very important, and I will tell a client, at the very least, you guys are going to meet with a coach. So if you need that individual, you have that connection. I've had some cases where the clients are like, nope, we don't want a coach. And I've said very few cases, well, then we're not doing this because you guys need a coach.
Going back to the initial consult, do you have any visuals or handouts that you frequently use?
Yeah. So oftentimes when clients are contacting me, they're in the information gathering stage. And so I have an email that I send out afterwards. I'm going to send you an email that goes over the different processes that we talked about. And I say, feel free to forward this to your spouse. Like, it's not a secret what all the options are. And it's a good way for you to have an entree to say, hey, I've talked with Tara. She's a collaborative attorney. Here's her website, which says on my website that I do not go to court, so they can see that that's the kind of attorney that I am. And say, here's the processes we talked about. I'd like to do collaborative. I give the Collaborative Professionals of Washington website in the email, say your spouse can go to this website to learn more, to find a collaborative professional, collaborative attorney to consult with or work with. Literally in the email, it says, feel free to forward this to your spouse. So then when they do it, I'm already saying, here, this is information for both of you. I have some other more diagrammatic flows of a collaborative case that sometimes I'll provide as well. But kind of my stock follow-up, shall we say, to a consultation where really they're not, because some clients come and say, well, it's collaborative, my spouse wants to do collaborative, I want to do collaborative, great, then I don't do that. But if it's truly a client who is like, I need to know what my different options are, then I always send that follow-up email because I say, it's a lot to take in. And so here I'm giving all this information, it's a lot to absorb. So I always follow up with an email saying, here's what we talked about. Yeah.
In this initial consult, do you bring up domestic violence or screen for DV at all?
I don't ask that as a direct question.
Sure.
But certainly, and again, this is also why I let clients talk themselves in the beginning, because you can kind of get a feeling for what's going on. And if there are things, again, domestic violence, alcohol issues, drug addiction, that kind of thing, mental health issues, 9 times out of 10 people will, if they're less so if it's their issue, but certainly from the other spouse, you kind of get that information. And especially when you have a collaborative case and you're talking with the other collaborative attorney, say, hey, this is what I heard, what's going on.
Do you ask whether there's a possibility of reconciling?
Again, if it seems like it's something that is possible, then I do. Yeah. And I've had some consultations. I've said, why are you guys getting divorced? Like, I don't get this. Have you tried counseling? Have you tried? And usually they're like, yeah, we have. Yeah.
In a typical consult, what would you say are the questions that you get most frequently about collaborative? And then how do you respond?
The questions I get mostly have to do with people concerned about the cost. I do explain, like, this is meetings and there's people and and people are like, oh my God, how much is this going to cost us? And the good thing about collaborative is I can say, okay, let's do the math. We have some tools that, Jesse, you did that wonderful survey of the average cost of collaborative divorce. And so I'm able to say, like, this is how much it's going to cost. And then I can also say, and do not think that if you're doing a mediation process or something like that, yes, it's probably going to be less. But if you are doing a process where attorneys are directly involved, a collaborative case, cooperative case, God forbid, a litigation case, do not think it's going to be any cheaper. And the great thing about a collaborative case is we talk about fees in the process. Our very first meeting, we say, okay, divorce isn't free. How are you guys going to pay for this? What source are you going to use? You guys have the option at the end of the day, if you want to true up your attorney's fees, you can do that. That is not an option in a cooperative case. Maybe it's an option in a cooperative case. It's not an option in a litigation case. And you can have one client going off to the races and having huge attorney's fees, and you have no visibility into it, and it's just eating away at the community estate, or one person is racking up debt that they then have to pay from the assets that they receive. No, divorce is not free and it's not cheap, period, end of story. But at least in the collaborative process, you have visibility and control over how those fees are paid.
So I learned earlier that you send out kind of a stock email when you have someone who's interested in collaborative divorce about what you suggest are next steps. Hey, forward this along to your spouse, get their feedback.
Yep.
Do you ever invite that client to come back with their spouse for you to talk to both of them about collaborative divorce?
I've done that a couple times. I don't invite them, but I've
Okay.
had that happen. I've actually had clients contact, like both parties contact me and say, we would like to talk to you. I was like, okay, I mean, just understand I can't give any legal advice, so don't think you're really like, when this is happening, so what's going on? No, I can talk to you about the process and I can talk to both of you about the process. So yeah, I've done that before. I think I've had that once or twice that the party that I consulted with has said, hey, my spouse would like to talk to you. I was like, oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, like I can't give you any legal advice, but I can absolutely talk to you about the process.
So going back to frequently asked questions about collaborative divorce, I heard that cost is a frequent
Mm.
question. How about any other common questions? Timeline, any other
How long it take?
conclusions?
What does everybody want to know? How much is it? How long is it going to take, right? And again, the great thing about the collaborative process is you can say, well, first meeting is this, then there's usually 6 to 8 weeks until our next meeting. Then we're always scheduling 2 meetings in advance because you're trying to coordinate a lot of calendars.
Hmm.
I also say you have an agenda at every meeting. So you know what's happening, you know why it's happening, you know what homework you need to do in between in order to keep that process moving. And when people say, "Oh my God, what is going to be like 6 to 9 months?" It's like, yeah. And again, outside of the collaborative process, it's going to be the same, except you don't have any control over when your spouse does X or Y, or when the attorney gets around to doing A, B, or C. But in a collaborative process, you know when your next meetings are, you know what you need to do, and you know what your timeline is.
So we already heard about what the follow-up looks like. So we're here to the conclusion. What would you say are the best ways to build relationships with other collaborative practitioners in advance of having cases together?
I think the most important thing for newer practitioners is to really get involved in the collaborative community. I think it's super important to, whether it's being involved within a statewide organization, we have a statewide practice group that any professional, new or not, is welcome to join, and that's a great way to meet people in the community. Also, make sure you're active in smaller practice groups and the collaborative community wherever you are. I think that's the number one thing, is to get involved in the collaborative community. And I think the other important thing is, don't just sit back and think that the phone's going to ring with all these collaborative cases. You really need to talk about the collaborative process. And Jesse, I know you and I were talking before we started this, and I said one of the things that just amazes me when I talk to younger professionals, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to build a collaborative practice. Nobody calls for collaborative work. And I say, well, when a client contacts you, do you go over the options? Do you talk about a collaborative case? No. So literally, people are sitting back waiting for clients to specifically contact them about a collaborative case rather than saying, oh, okay, new client, let's have a conversation. As I was saying before, what are your different options? Because, I've been in the collaborative world for a long time. I still get clients who contact me and I say, oh, going over the list, like, oh, collaborative, that sounds great. Yeah, that's what I want to do. The greater public, they don't know what they don't know, right? So it's up to us to give them that information.
The purpose of these interviews is to help practitioners improve on how they talk about collaborative with prospective clients. So we just heard some words of wisdom. Hey, when you get a client, tell them about collaborative. Don't wait for them to
Yeah.
bring it up. You bring it up. You tell them
Yeah.
about it. What other words of wisdom do you have for a newer practitioner who's trying to increase their collaborative caseload?
So again, I think the two biggest pieces are get involved in the collaborative professional community and talk to new prospective clients about the collaborative process. And the other thing is patience. I mean, it really is patience. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you do those things, you will steadily build a collaborative practice. And the other thing I will say is, once you feel like you're getting established in the collaborative community and those collaborative cases are coming, don't be afraid to turn away litigation cases, because it truly is a if you build it, they will come kind of world, right? So if you are saying, I'm a collaborative attorney, but I'm taking all these litigation cases, what message does that give? Yes, you're a collaborative attorney, but to the greater public, they're going to know you as being a litigation attorney. So you're going to get those litigation cases. If having the courage to say, no, even if it's just saying, I won't go to court, like I'll do cooperative cases. Again, it's super scary to say, I will only do collaborative. But make that your practice. Make that your practice standard, is to say, I will not go to court. I will do cooperative cases. I'll do mediation cases. I'll do collaborative cases. And then that's the kind of cases you're going to start getting. Because again, that's how you'll be known in the community. That's how your referrals are going to come in from other clients who had the same experience of going through a collaborative process or a cooperative process. And it also trains your brain out of litigation. And so the way that you bring yourself to cases is a more collaborative mindset rather than slipping into the old paradigms of, well, a court would never do that, or, oh, we can just forget it. We don't have to talk anymore. We're just going to have the commissioner decide. So it's not only how you present yourself to the community, it's how you bring yourself to the case.
Anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up for today?
I'll just reiterate, it's patience. It doesn't happen overnight, but once you get to that critical mass and you start seeing more and more collaborative cases, it really is a satisfying practice to be in. So don't give up, but don't expect to happen overnight. And I will also say that if the new practitioners that are out there, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to other people who have been in the collaborative community for a long time. We are all more than happy to mentor you and to give advice, give feedback. Yeah. So I guess that would be the other thing is to reach out one-on-one, and because we'll all do it. We'll all help you out and talk to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Tara, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. If you'd like to learn more about Tara, you can email her. Can you share your email?
Yes, it's Tara, Tara, at Richardson and Ring, and that's RINGE.com. So Richardson and Ring, all one word. And again, email is the best way to get in touch with me.
Great. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Collab Lab. We hope you found this discussion helpful as you think about how to introduce collaborative divorce to prospective clients in your own practice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.